Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Holy Happy Hour, formerly known as the Narycast. New name, same podcast. We're super excited for you guys to be here. Today's episode is actually brought to you by Sacrilegious. So it's kind of a big announcement that we made on social media a few days ago. But Sacrilegious, if you guys don't know about them, I love their mission statement, which is to start conversations with joyful products. Great way to evangelize. You guys can check out last week's episode, actually been 2 weeks ago, episode with the CEO of Sacrilegious, of him talking a little bit about how that ministry started and how God really had a hand in it and really blew it up. It's super cool. But when you guys go to sacrilegious.com, you guys can use my link in the bio, or you guys can use Happy at checkout, and you guys get 10% off your order, which is awesome. So today's guest, I'm honored to have. It's actually one of our seminarians here in the Diocese of Tulsa. And fun fact, we went to the same high school as well. But Luke Bland, how are you doing?
Doing well, man. Good to see you.
Good. Awesome. And so, it was so funny when I very first, and you probably remember this, when I very first saw your name on the poster, but then you came by St. Philip Neri. I was like, golly, this guy's name looks so familiar. Like, for some reason, it looks so familiar. And I knew, I was like, I'm pretty sure this guy went to my high school. And I remember asking you, and the first thing, you're like, oh, yeah, Andrew, right? And I was like, no, Josh, but yeah, the same family. But it was crazy because now looking back, because I converted 5 years ago, I think to myself of like, there really weren't, I don't think, that many Catholics in Berryhill, or if they were, you just didn't know about them because
I don't think there were any.
Yeah. I found out recently that the Lutz, like Josie Lutz, Dana, Kristen, Tim, so Tim is the head knight at St. Mary's.
Yep.
And so Knights of Columbus. And so I literally dated Kristen, and he was like, yeah, I don't think you ever came to mass with us. I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't even know you guys were Catholic. That's crazy.
No, that's right. Yeah. I ran into them at Holy Family earlier this summer, actually. And that was totally my surprise. I had no idea they were Catholic either growing up.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't think hardly anybody was. I think there was one girl in my class, and of course, my whole family was baptized Catholic, but we were not. We were not raised Catholic.
So how
Sign of faith? I don't think. I don't remember anybody. So
yeah. Now, is your family are you guys from here? Did your parents move here? Because don't you have family elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was born in Great Bend, Kansas.
Okay.
And that's where my dad's from. My mom's from South America, Colombia.
Okay.
My dad's from Kansas. Born in Great Bend, lived there until I was 5 or so, then moved to Wichita for a couple of years, and then I came to Tulsa when I was about 7. So I was raised in Tulsa.
Okay, gotcha. So what was your kind of upbringing in the Catholic Church in general? Where you said kind of wasn't as practicing, was your family kind of practicing at first and then kind of you fell away, or how did that work?
Yeah, well, it's funny. If you would have asked me anything about Catholicism, again, when we were in high school or at Berryhill, I wouldn't have even thought that my family had anything to do with the Catholic Church because we never went at all.
Yeah.
I went to Catholic preschool pre-K and kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
That was my only Catholic education. That was when we were in Wichita, and I think we went to mass maybe a couple times because we had to. I was too young. My sisters would remember that. But I didn't remember that, and we were just raised Protestant because my mom, being from South America, is culturally Catholic because that's the way it is. But my dad, his dad was a Baptist / Methodist preacher, pastor.
Oh wow!
And so
is he still to this day?
No, he's deceased, unfortunately. So
okay, gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. So living in Wichita, another kind of, I would call that place culturally Catholic as well. Is that that's where you were? That's where your Catholic education was?
If you can call. Pre-K.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. You didn't learn everything you needed to know in pre-K. Is that? I'm just kidding. That's awesome. So then you grew up. Did you guys just attend non-denominational churches in Tulsa?
We went to a Methodist church.
Oh, okay.
Pretty much my whole life, I think, from even when we were in Great Bend to certainly in Tulsa, we went to a popular Methodist church here in Tulsa. So that's where I was raised.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because I remember growing up, I was at a Baptist church, which I feel like that's what Berryhill really was. I feel like most people, because you had Viewacres Baptist and then Berryhill Baptist. You had two relatively big Baptist churches View Acres being kind of the younger, like kind of where if you had youth and kids, you would go, and then Berry Hill Baptist if you were like over the age of 80. But I remember just growing up and like it was just always like I didn't want to go. We actually used to just like my parents would wake us up and we would just like act like we were asleep. Because if we acted like we were asleep, like they would wake us up, say, get ready. I'm like, okay. Then they would leave and we just stay in bed and act like we're asleep. And I remember like my mom would walk in and you could just kind of hear just, like, and then she would shut the door real quietly. And I remember just thinking like, yes, we're good. And like, I don't have to go. But it was, really interesting. So what brought you to where you're at now then? Like, so what's kind of your testimony, like your story of like, now you're in seminary, like you went from that upbringing to now in seminary.
Yeah, well, it's been quite the ride, quite a journey.
Yeah.
But I mean, similar to you, like I hated going to church when I was a kid, especially as a teenager. As a kid, I was fine. You just you don't really know the difference. But into the preteen years and teenage years, the same thing. Just like putting up a fight every Sunday morning just to not go.
Yeah.
And I actually really kind of rejected the faith when I was a teenager. And there was a lot going on there, but part of it was just teenage rebellion. But part of it was like I had like serious questions that I felt that nobody really could answer. So, for example, like I didn't really see like why like religion was important or why Christianity was important, other than the fact that I don't know, my family's done it. And my dad's dad was kind of big in it.
Yeah.
But are we just doing it just because like we're born into this, or is like there's like actually like a legitimate reason to engage and to believe? And I didn't see that. And of course, I couldn't articulate that when I was 12, 13, 14. But that was kind of what I was thinking. And I do have explicit memories of like asking like my youth director just like some of these bigger questions of like how do we even know God's real, and like why does it actually matter like the way that we live, and like so just questions about morality and like the Christian life, and then just like belief in general. And she really didn't have a lot of answers, unfortunately. She was a great person, and still is. But yeah, it just wasn't really able to challenge me in the way that I really needed and was hoping for. And so I kind of just rejected the faith, and I just decided I didn't believe in God, and kind of just carried out my teenage years like that as a self-professed atheist. It was kind of funny. I remember looking up on Wikipedia, like what is it? What do you call a person that doesn't believe in these things? Atheism. Like, I think that's me. Yeah. It's like one day I just decided that was what I was and how I was going to live. So that's kind of like when as I was a child, and I lived all the way through my teenage years. Kind of just did whatever I wanted to do. But as I got older, I kind of just started to sense, like even when I was 18, 19, that like the message of the world, like something about it wasn't true, or it wasn't really persuasive or compelling. I just had this sense about me. I don't know. I've always been a guy who's like been pretty reflective and thoughtful, and just asking like bigger philosophical questions. And I couldn't escape from that sort of hunger to know the truth. And so when I was even 18, 19, 20, I remember just thinking to myself, just like noticing like how rampant like relativism was at that time. And this is about like 2014, 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
When I really think that was kind of like the cultural phenomenon of the time, where people were sort of criticizing, and we see that now, but it's just gone way beyond just relativism. So but anyway, I was even though I would have considered myself politically pretty liberal, pretty secular, non-religious. Even I was like, I don't know if that's true. Like the whole you do you, like your truth and my truth, and like, you can believe whatever you want. It doesn't really affect me. I kind of had a sense that was bogus, and that if there was a way to live that it applied to everybody, if it was really true. And so I kind of had a sense about me that I didn't think that was, like a long-term living solution. And so anyway, I just I happened to stumble upon this YouTuber who was an anarchist. And I have to admit, it's hilarious, but I totally bought into his stuff for a while. But what's funny is like I was just that hungry for like a worldview. Like seriously, I was really starved. I didn't know what was right, how to live a good life. That I was just watching these guys on YouTube talking about how like taxation is theft, and like the government is kind of out to get you, and like it's intrinsically evil, and it's just like I laugh at it now, but I was really kind of of stuff for a little bit. But I'm thankful. I'm really thankful for these guys because some of them were actually like pretty well educated, and one of them exposed me to Aristotle. And we know in the Catholic tradition that Aristotle was beloved, and Thomas Aquinas kind of baptizes him into our tradition. And Aristotle is one of these guys who's very much, he wouldn't say this because different cultural circumstances, but he would very much be one of these guys who's like, your truth versus my truth. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so I was really compelled by that. I thought it was super interesting. I was just hungry for it. I consumed a lot of that stuff. And so like, this is like the story of like the ship, like slowly starting to turn because there's a lot of preparatory work that the Lord had to do, just sort of like to engage my mind and kind of just get me start to think and slowly make me more and more open. So the ship is slowly turning. But then the Lord, in his wisdom, sent a person who he knew that I would receive the best and who would really get the ship to turn, which is just a young Catholic woman that I met actually swing dancing.
Nice.
Yeah. No, I got super into that for a while. When I was in college. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, she actually was also interested in these kinds of like political ideas that I was kind of interested in, and she had similar questions, slightly different answers. But I was just really interested in her, and I asked her like, like I don't often meet people who are asking these kind of same questions or as well kind of versed in all this stuff. And I was like, are you religious? I just asked her that. Well, and I actually kind of asked it in a sarcastic way. I'm like, there's no way you're religious, right? It's like assuming that like if she's this intelligent, like she wasn't going to be religious.
Yeah, she wouldn't fall for that stuff.
Exactly, because that's what I thought. I thought it was all a fairy tale. And she said, "No, I'm Catholic." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, like, how do you justify that? Because, how do you justify that?"
Yeah.
And I remember very clearly, we were having pizza after the dance, and she looked at me. And she said, "I think God is truth itself." I was like, "What?" I've never heard anything like that before. And of course, I didn't believe right there on the spot, But I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to hear more about it. And so I just asked her, and she kind of explained more about that. But the point being is like that is at the heart of our Catholic intellectual tradition to like say that God is truth itself. And that actually was what I was looking for and hungering for when I was 12, 13, 14, when I said earlier, like I had all these big questions and like no one really had an answer for me at the church in which I was raised. And so it just caught my attention because I'm like, wow, like I've never heard any Christian say something like that kind of profound or like philosophical. So it totally caught my attention. We ended up becoming good friends, and we just had a lot of discussions and arguments and debates, and it was awesome. I loved it. But she beat me every single time. And she knew St. Thomas Aquinas, she knew Augustine, she knew Anselm, or at least somewhat enough to kind of present her own kind of argument about that kind of stuff. And I mean, I was just fascinated by Christian philosophy and by the fact that there are actually men and women who have thought long and hard about these questions over the centuries, and just being exposed to the rich intellectual tradition of the Catholic Church. Like there actually are answers to the basic questions, the big but basic questions of like who is God and is he real and can we know that he's real? And so I was just I was stunned by all that, but I was really really fascinated, and I kind of just like fell headfirst into it. So that's kind of a basic introduction. So
absolutely. And I like what you said about how like the ship kind of slowly turned. I've always used the phrase of like something like Jesus will grab like if you let him like grab you and like turn you around. And that's how I felt like it was for me. Like I didn't have like that light switch moment where it was just like, oh my gosh, like holy crap, how have I never known this? Like I'm like the most devout Catholic ever now. But it was more like building a computer, and you had to plug in all the wires, or like Jesus was like, I'm gonna turn you around real gently, real slowly. We're gonna just face you the other direction and head towards the true faith, or just the truth in general. Because I just grew up in a non-denominational churches, like in college, especially, but I feel like sometimes that's what he does. But then
Yep.
for others, it sometimes is like, oh, hey, I know exactly what'll get you to turn around, boom, and then you just like spin around and you're like there. And some people are like, whoa, like, oh my gosh, I'm slapped across. But I kind of had the exact kind of thing as you, is like the only difference between us was I didn't have any objections because I had absolutely no knowledge of the Catholic faith, which was probably a good thing because I could be super hard headed back then. But my wife was the one who just brought me to Mass. Father Elkin was the one that introduced me to Harrison Garlick. Harrison Garlick was the one who invited me to RCIA and actually ended up doing one-on-one RCIA with me because the scheduling didn't work out. But even Harrison, like throughout classes, it was just like, it was okay, that makes sense. Like, like I didn't really like the role of Mary. Like, okay, yeah, the true presence in the Eucharist. That was probably the biggest one. That was kind of like we're going to take five chords and plug them in at the same time. Where it's like, whoa, like you're right. He does mean it literally. And it was just stuff like that where it was like it's kind of a slow turn. I've always encouraged people that are like considering the faith. We got a pretty active Bible study that we get people into, and a lot of Protestants in it that are very open to it. But are taking it very seriously of like, I'm not just going to jump into it. And we're always like super excited for that because we're like, yeah, don't just jump into it. Like we want you to understand it as well. But sometimes it is like, I think people are waiting for that aha moment that like, I don't know, they think it is going to be some light switch thing, but sometimes you just got to open yourself up to it and the truth will just kind of slowly turn you around. And I don't know if it was your experience, but like, did you just kind of get to the point where it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really have any other questions from here. Like, or was there a specific moment that it was kind of like, no, it was when I lost the argument on this, or it was when I gained this knowledge. That's when I was like, okay, I want to become Catholic.
Actually, a little bit of both. And to your point about like how Jesus kind of gets us or leads us down the path of conversion, it's different for everybody. But actually, to your second question, actually, there was kind of like a moment I remember. Not necessarily for like, oh, I'm going to be Catholic, but more of like, oh my gosh, I think God's real. Because like over the time that I was, getting close to the friend that I had met, and just discussing all these things with her, I would go home and I would think about it. I remember one day I was driving to Petco, and I'm like, man, like if this is what she thinks God is, like I think I believe it. Like the first cause, the necessary first cause. That I don't need to go into it, but the point being is like she just presented God to me like not this guy in the sky with like the white beard that's kind of just seems like it could also be like this myth or like Zeus or like a fairy tale kind of thing. It was actually something I could really sink my teeth into intellectually. And again, whenever I was the point being is there was a couple moments that I remember. The second moment being I was driving home from hanging out with her, and this is a couple weeks later after the moment at Petco, but it really hit me like, oh my gosh, like I believe in God now. And I remember like, I actually had a big grin on my face. I was like really excited because for me, it wasn't just like Protestant to Catholic. It was really atheist to Catholic. And so there's a lot of ground to cover. And like, it was just like it. And I was excited for a variety of reasons, but it was just such a paradigm shift from like there is no God, like I'm kind of ruler of my life and I'm in charge, and but also it's miserable because I don't really have the answers that I'm looking for. So suddenly like, oh my gosh, like there is a being that's the cause of everything and like way bigger. But there was also like an excitement there too, like maybe like So anyway, so there was kind of, to your question, there was kind of a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's awesome. We just talked about in our Bible study last night. We really took the Our Father prayer and dissected it, and we talked about like Thy kingdom come and that line in it, and we talked about how are we the ones sitting on the throne in our heart, or are we allowing God to sit at the throne of our hearts? Which is such like a great place to start. Because some people may be kind of like in your situation where maybe they're atheists or they're just not sure, agnostic, they're whatever, but they just don't know and they just are struggling. I feel like that's almost like a great place to start because that is like, I feel like the big aha moment you need to have because there's some Protestants that I know that are like on fire for Jesus, and it's so cool. They pray with their family, and it's so awesome to see. And it's like they've got that aspect really like nailed down. But for me, it was always the like, because I was like that. I was this Protestant life church goer, leading a Bible study, going to church every Sunday. Sometimes I'd go on Wednesdays as well. And I was helping with the kids ministry and stuff like that. But I kind of had this like overall sense, a little bit of way I was similar, but also really different than your story, is that like I had a sense of like, there's got to be more to this. And I was kind of questioning stuff as well, like just from the Protestant standpoint of this. Basically, it's kind of faith alone is what they are, like a sola fide type thing. I don't know. I don't think Life Church would necessarily claim that, because they do encourage you to live a good life. But this faith alone type mentality that I had and I grew up with, I started to just like ask myself, like, there's got to be more to this. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't really care to. If someone wants to tell me one day, like, that's awesome. But I just always thought in my head, and I feel like that, looking back on it, like that was God talking to me. I wasn't listening, but he was in my ear talking to me, saying like, hey, there's more to this. And so I'm thinking like, there's got to be more to this. But it's really him saying like, there's more to this. And like later on in college, there's got to be more to this. And even in like later on, before I met my wife, there's got to be more to this. And finally my wife came along, and God was like, he's not listening. You tell him. And so it's kind of like this whole discernment of, it was mine was kind of an incidental discernment. I was discerning, like, is this the true way? Is this all there is to it? Do I just need to believe in you and try to live a good life? Or is there more to it? But yeah, I just found myself kind of throughout life not caring. But then when I finally got to it, that stuck with me, that he put in my head a long time ago, helped me when I was introduced to the Catholic faith that I knew nothing about, had no objections to. It definitely helped a lot. And like you were saying, everyone's got a different story, and God has a different plan for everyone. Some it may be longer, some may be super short. But that discernment phase is like, you can just offer it up and like lay it out to God and like go for his will. I feel like that's kind of what finally happened to me, especially when Harrison told me, I don't want you to do this for your wife. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I should not be learning more about the Catholic. I shouldn't be becoming Catholic for my wife. That's interesting. But it was such a great thing. But yeah, it was kind of an interesting kind of growing up and then coming into the Catholic faith. And then when I started learning about it, my eyes just started getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, I love this. Like, and it got to the point where I was like, I'm going to sell my business and work for the church. Like, I love this. Like, let's go. So, yeah.
Well, I like what you said about the way you realized looking back that God was speaking to you was desire in your heart for more. Because actually, that's not to make it too intellectual or philosophical, but that's one of the arguments for God's existence that I think is really good, that we should, that most people haven't really thought about. But like, it's basically, the idea is like that we're made for God, and so we have a God-sized hole in our heart. And whenever we're walking around this life and we're fulfilled by nothing perfectly, we kind of think to ourselves like, man, is there more than this?
Yeah.
Yes, there is, and it's God, and it's the fullness of the truth in the Catholic faith, and the life of the sacraments, and the life of the Spirit. That's what we're made for, and of course, heaven forever in eternity. But I just wanted to point out to you that, like, what you said, like, that's just like classic of how God works. Is like, he made us for himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't have the fullness of him yet. You had part of it, and so that was good. But you were really wondering, like, man, there's got to be more.
Yeah. So, and I found myself in my life, even with like work. Like, I feel like this is where a lot of people, I saw a podcast one time, and they said something that everybody's searching for God. Most people just don't know it, because it is like, man, if I was just making $5,000 a month at my work, I'd be set. I'd be happy. But then they start making 5,000. It's like, maybe if it was 7,500 a month, I'd be happy. And then they start making that, if it's 10,000, or like, maybe if I just like had a kid, like if I was finally blessed with a kid, I'd be happy. But then the kid comes, like, maybe if the kid had a friend to play with. And it's just like, you're never satisfied if you're chasing after these worldly things. And I feel like that's what, like, I was like trying to find success in career, and I was trying to find a wife, and I had I had two really, really bad relationships right before I met my wife. And I feel like it was just God trying to slap me across the face, like saying, like, you're searching for the wrong things. And so luckily I met my wife and kind of the truth all at the same time. But it was a blessing to be able to walk through that with her. I actually went to RCA for a month and a half without telling her. She knew I went to the first one, but then I went back over and over again because Harrison on that second day told me, I don't want you to do this for your wife. So I didn't tell her I was going back. And so she had no idea. And then I asked her to be my sponsor, and she's like, I didn't even know you were going. So it was awesome.
That's great.
Yeah. Now, were you baptized Catholic, confirmation, everything Catholic as a kid, or did you have to do that in college?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier I was baptized Catholic as a baby.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That was just because, again, my mom's culturally Catholic, and so she actually took me back to Colombia to get me baptized, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, wow.
And actually, as a matter of fact, this summer I went to Colombia just as a vacation with some family, and I went back to that original baptismal site, which was awesome.
Oh, that's super cool.
I literally had not been there since I was 6 months old.
Yeah.
Just a little parish church.
That is awesome.
St. John of Avila, which is also really cool. This is a worthy tangent, I think.
Yeah.
But do you know anything about St. John of Avila?
No, that's honestly the first time I've ever heard that name.
Okay, yeah. So he is one of the very few saints that is a diocesan priest who's been canonized, basically. And he's also a doctor of the church. And just with my story of like totally, first of all, being baptized in the Catholic Church, but like never being raised in the Catholic Church, being raised a Protestant, rejecting the Protestant faith, living a life as an atheist for 7 years, then like having this wonderful conversion back to the Catholic faith, and then now like I'm in formation to be a diocesan priest, and I returned back to the baptismal site of where I was baptized originally and first received like the gift of grace and divine life, and almost certainly like receiving the patronage of St. John of Avila, meaning like I know he's been praying for me my whole life. Being baptized at a church which is under his patronage. Yeah. And it was just like, dude, this is too good to be true. Like,
yeah.
I mean, how many parishes do you even see that are named after like diocesan priests, saints?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the one that was the one I was baptized at, and now I've returned to that parish 4 years into my formation to be a diocesan priest. So it was like, this is too much to be just like a happenstance.
Yeah, and those are so cool. I think I went on a retreat and they called those God wink moments, and it's like picturing like when you like finally like realize like how God had blessed you through a certain way or whatever, and it's just like being able to like look up and like God, if you were able to see his face, like God just like winking at you, just like, I know, I got you, like don't worry about it. Kind of just gives you that comfort of like, okay, like you're there, you're all loving, you are that fatherly figure for us. It's great. That's kind of what I thought, similarly, not near as crazy of a story, but that's what how I've always kind of thought with that, like thanking God for like, man, I'm so glad you made me curious, at least curious enough to always think like there's got to be more, because that's the only thing that brought me to the Catholic faith. Because if I wouldn't have been thinking that, I could still just be on fire and at Life Church. And me and my wife had actually, when we were first dating, had talked about when we get married, how she was going to stay in the Catholic Church. The deal breaker was that we were going to raise our kids in the Catholic Church, and I was fine with that. I said, if I was going to be at this other non-denominational church, that I'd want our kids to be able to come to both. And she even told me, it's like, I don't want them to go to both, because as kids, I think they would go to yours and be like, this is more fun, but that's not what church is about. And so I think that like that would honestly be a deal breaker for me too. And so
good for you.
I know, right? It's awesome. She was always very strong-willed. Actually, Father Carey told me one time, she's like, your wife's the only person that's ever that I know that's self-evangelized herself. She just ran into a friend who was Catholic and asked her about a rosary, and said, "Oh my gosh, you Catholic? Can I go to mass with you?" And then sought out Father Stewart, and Father like talked to him, and he's like, "Wait, so what do you like to?" It's like, "I've been studying this. I actually watched the Catholic mass or a Catholic wedding mass last night, and I'm so in love with it. Like, this is so great. I want to learn more about it." And Father Stewart was just like, "What's happening right now?" And so she's always been super strong-willed. Thank God, because I can't imagine like how damaging that could have been for our family to like be raised in two different churches, and maybe they did like decide one way or the other, like decided to go to the Protestants, so they weren't in the full communion, which would have been sad in itself. Or maybe they felt so torn between both that they're like, I don't want anything to do with any of it. We could have done some damage. And so I always thank God for obviously bringing her in my life at the exact right time when I'm super open and like, and just being able to then be introduced to Father Elkin and Harrison and go through this OCI, I guess what's called now, process, which has just been awesome. And now I'm able to sponsor a guy through it this year, and I'm looking forward to hopefully sponsoring some more people throughout. It's just such a beautiful process, but that's awesome. So how was your discernment process? Like, what was that moment like? Was it in college when you were kind of like, I think I may be called to be a priest?
Yeah. So I entered full communion with the Catholic Church in Easter 2018. And I entered seminary in fall 2020. So it was actually really fast turnaround.
Yeah.
Basically like the smallest amount of time, the least amount of time that's required.
Yeah.
Basically when I first entered into full communion with the church, that was not on my mind. I was not thinking about it. Always wanted to be married growing up. I think like most men.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically I was just getting, as I was approaching graduation and as I was beginning to work more like practical jobs where it was like potentially my career, I just kind of was like dissatisfied. And I struggled a lot to really think like, man, is this really what I want? Like, is this really going to make me happy? So I was working a job. So this is funny. We've already talked about this, but I'll bring it up. I was teaching a drum and bugle corps. Anybody out there who knows what that is? But,
comment below if you know what that is, guy. I feel like anyone I bring it up to, they're like, I have no idea what that is. And they see my tattoo and they're like, are you French? Nope. You from New Orleans? Nope. Like,
Madison Scouts, baby.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's funny. No. So, but for those who don't, it's just like basic professional marching band. It's a thing. Anyway, I was working for a group and I was teaching because I was very much into that stuff for a while. I loved it. But as I became Catholic, like I just realized that like I wanted God to be the center of my life, and he needed to be. And just that environment for me was not really conducive to keeping that in front and center, because it's really like all. I mean, you remember like every day, like, like you're rehearsing 12 hours a day. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And so in teaching in one of these places, it was like I got to go to mass on Sundays, but like that was basically it. It just felt like there was a lot of competition between like my priorities, basically.
Yeah. No.
And so anyway, I was teaching and I just was realizing, man, this is not really what I want. I was talking to a friend of mine there who's a coworker, and she actually kind of liked to talk to me about like the faith. And I kind of asked her one day, like, hey, like, do you like what you do, and could you see yourself doing this for a long time? She's like, oh yeah, love it, love teaching, love working with kids, music, it's totally my thing. I was like, wow, that's a lot of confidence that I don't feel. And she was like, what do you think? And I was like, I don't know, like, it just doesn't seem to like really resonate. And she's like, well, what do you think? And what would you do? And this is really a crazy moment, totally Holy Spirit moment, because I did not plan this. I did not prepare this. I had never articulated this ever before. But right in that moment, it just came out of my mouth. Almost like it was just like, I think I want to be a priest. And it was like, wait, what did I just say?
Yeah, you're like, what did I just say?
That's not right. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to get married and have kids and just have a good Catholic family. But as soon as I said it, it was crazy. It was like, I don't know if this ever happened to you, Josh, but like whenever maybe you just say something true to somebody else, or somebody else says something true to you that you really need to hear. Maybe you didn't want to hear it, but it's just like, it just calls your focus back to reality. And kind of just like something, just like things just like integrate. And it's like, oh no, that's right. And like, I've been kind of trying to like avoid that, or once you just accept it, it's just like peaceful. And it was something kind of like that. As soon as I said it, it was like, I felt like, I almost felt like my body, like my spine, like integrated, or like in my heart, it just kind of like, fit. Like that just fit. And it was like, that's never fit before, but once it clicked, it was like, I can't unclick it,
Yeah.
Because that was part of it. I was like, oh shoot, like, what did I just say?
Yeah.
Like, what did that do? Because I think it might be true. But yeah, that was the experience. And then basically that was whenever it became serious. That was the summer of 2019. And so a year later, I would be entering the seminary. But I went back to school for my final semester year, sort of. And I, just continued to get plugged into the Newman Center more and more, had a great community of faith, loved people I was with, loved talking about my faith. And it just confirmed what had already happened.
Yeah.
That summer. I went to the SEEK conference, SLS 20. It was an amazing experience. Yeah. Really encountered the Father's love for me in a powerful, beautiful way. Just experiencing like my own sonship, being claimed, chosen, beloved for eternity by way of my baptism, and just really like realize, oh my gosh, like no, I desire to serve the Father. Like I'm the son of the Father. I want to serve Him, and that's who I am. So I want to live that way. And that was kind of it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's awesome. What's funny is you're actually the second person I've heard say that, because that's Father Porter's story too of his. I think it was in confession or something, but it was like when he was in high school, and I think it was like he finished, got absolution, his penance, whatever, and then it's just like he stayed there, and then the priest was like, "Is there something else?" And he's like, "I want to be a priest," and then he left, and like that's so funny. And he's like ran into him again like a couple weeks later and told him like, "I think I want to be a priest," and he's like, oh, "Okay, let's talk." But I'm like, that's so funny. I like it's almost like God's putting it on your guys' heart, and it's just like it's like, okay, I'm gonna speak through you. Maybe you'll listen to you. I'm just gonna speak through you. I'm like, that's so funny. Yeah, and which kind of brought me to what I was gonna ask about too. Because it's definitely something I think is a work on progress for everybody, but it's just like discernment in general. Obviously, everyone's going to at one point, or definitely should, is discern their vocation. I had to do it with getting married to Lindsay. I didn't even understand what that whole process was. I knew for a fact I wanted to be married. Like being a priest never was even an option or whatever. Like I just knew I want to be married. But yeah, like what that looks like. And I don't know if you have like advice for someone who's like, maybe new to that word, or new to like, what does that mean? What does that mean to discern? Because there's obviously like making choices in life, but then there's like a deeper meaning of like, no, like actually discerning this.
Right. Oh, it's a good question. I mean, on the most basic level, I think discernment is just paying attention to God and paying attention to your own heart and what draws you. Because I think, God leads us very often through our desires, not always. But for myself, like it was very clear, like looking at my story, that like it just, whenever I said that I think I want to be a priest, well, consider the fact that I was not really happy with what I was doing. I didn't know if I really wanted to keep doing it. And when I said it, there was a deep sense of peace. And so those are definitely two signs. Like where does God give peace? Where does He provide peace? When you're really being led by Him. And then I came back to you before I went to seminary that last year, and I was just plugged into the community, and that's where I wanted to be. That's where the desire really emerged. Because I said that I wanted to be a priest, but I was like, I don't know, I don't really want that. Maybe. But I was still unhappy with my other job. But then I was actually in a community of faith, and I'm like, this is what I want. This is really what I want to be. This is where my heart's alive. And to even like imagine being like a shepherd of this community, that's where my heart came alive. And so I think discernment for myself, I don't think I'm qualified to speak for everybody or in like in a universal way. For myself, is very much just like paying attention to like, where does my heart come alive for the Lord. And then taking that to prayer and listening to Him. And it was always just like consolation and like affirmation in those places. That I was following Him and taking risks and just letting Him make me come alive. So
have you heard of the Many Parts Ministry? It's Jill Simons. She's here in Tulsa. They do like charism workshops, like the charisms being these gifts we receive at baptism.
I've heard of. And I know of similar things. I don't think.
And so we took this quiz and everything, and like it's like 100 questions, and then afterwards she does this workshop and talks about anyway, one of my, I think it's number 2 or number 3. I don't think it was number 1. Actually, it might have been number 1. I'd have to look it up. But was discernment. And I was like, I guess I have always kind of had like a thought of like just having a feeling, like a gut feeling of like what's wrong or right, or what's like whether I should do something or not. But then she like kind of dove a little bit deeper into it, and I think that I need to like tap into this a little bit more. But yeah, like I've been trying to be better at like taking it to prayer. Like kind of you were saying, but like just taking it in to before I make a big decision, starting like an example I can think of is like starting this podcast. I talked to Father Elkin. I was like, I want to do this. Feel like it's on my heart. I want to, but I want to make sure like I'm not doing it because I want to be like the next Matt Fradd. I want to be a future guest speaker at Seek and like just travel in the world, like doing this and doing talks and stuff. I don't want to do it for my glory, but his glory. And he encouraged me to take it to prayer. And then he said something that was so interesting, and it was hard to do, but he was like, pray for like God to allow it to fail. Like if this is not your will, like let it fail. Like let the guests say no, let the videos not be viewed, show me a sign that it's not meant to be.
Wow.
And I was like,
great.
Ooh, well, that's crazy. So it's
probably didn't feel great.
yeah. So I'm like, that is such a great, like, though, like questions, like if you are discerning whether you should be doing or something or not, it's like taking it to prayer and it's like, if this girl is not who I should be marrying or dating, like, please send me a sign, like tell me that it's not meant to be or whatever. It's so hard to do. But I did it with this, and like all of a sudden, like the very first episode I ever posted, like kind of, it got like 40, 50 views or something. And like, it was actually a lot. And I had like 2 subscribers. So I was like, whoa, like that's crazy. And just keeps rolling. Like, I think we just passed, like we're at 807 right now. The views keep going up. People are coming on, and like, I've actually have been reached out to be on the show, like for people to be on the show. And Sacrilegious was like, we want to sponsor this podcast. I've been in talks with the Hallow app, like all this like crazy stuff that like, I'm like, this can't be from like what I'm doing. Like I'm doing just this simple podcast, talking to people about them and everything. Like this is like all God. Like I feel like that if I'm not able to go in and ask him and really kind of figure out, is this something you want me to do? But then also being able to offer it up to, like, don't let it, like, please, like, let it fail if this isn't something you want.
This is good. This is good, Josh. So what I'm hearing is like other principles of discernment that you just said. So the most recent one that you just said was like surrender the results to God. Like surrender, which means if God wants it to be, like there will be fruits that will that will testify the goodness of like the root. So you always test by the fruits. So because I think part of discernment is not just like thinking in your head; it's also eventually like taking concrete actions. You can discern. I think people sometimes don't realize that, and even with like marriage or the priest, like I don't know what to do. They just kind of like they never make a decision. Part of discernment is taking practical steps. Like what you're doing with this podcast, and then testing the fruits, good and bad, that come from it. And I think that's also what I'm hearing you do, and that will also reveal whether or not it has a good source, being the Holy Spirit for us. And that's the second thing I wanted to point out too, what I heard you say, which is, and this is what Father Elkin had you do, but I think it's really good. Testing to see, okay, am I the source, like my will, or is it God who's the source of this? Because not that everything that I do is bad, but like we have concupiscence, so we're inclined to sin. Meaning most of the time, like if it comes from me, like it's not necessarily coming from the Lord. And of course, that's not always the case. But like at the end of the day, we have to ask the question: is it about me? Is it about my attachment, my glory, my plans, which are getting in the way of what God really wants to do, or are my plans really being received from the Lord's plans? So I just want to point that out because like what you just said was the perfect like clinic of discernment. That was great.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that's great to hear from someone else, because it's like putting those things together, because it's like, this is what I'm feeling. I don't know if it's right. But and I know that when it comes to these kind of things that could be super fruitful, like anything like the enemy can do to distract you from it. So trying to figure out, because like I could have a couple weeks where I'm like, oh, the like subscriber counts are getting crazy. Like, man, maybe I actually could be like Matt Fradd. Maybe I could be like, and all of a sudden, like the enemy's like, I can't stop him from doing it, but maybe I can make his intentions like wrong. And Father Elkin talked about that, like in the discernment process. He said when he was in seminary, there was they talked about constantly purifying your intentions. And he said, obviously seminary being such a long process, that like seminaries and you probably have experienced this, are constantly have to like purify their intentions. And he actually said they had I think it's his first year, and they had a teacher or whatever, like ask like, why do you want to be a priest? And they had to answer in front of the class. And he basically would just like shut them all down. Like, it's like, I want to be a priest because I want to like serve at mass and be there to serve the people of the church. And it's like, no, that's a stupid answer, because you could do that as a deacon, you could do that as a layperson. Why do you want to be a priest? And it's like, well, because I want to help people and help the community. That's stupid. You could do that. And he would just like fire but he was just pointing out the point of like, just like purifying your intentions and making sure it's God's will versus your will. And it's not easy. I feel like anyone that feels like they struggle with discernment, it's like you're in good company, because that's everybody. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, awesome. Well, we're kind of coming up on time. I don't know if you had any last thoughts on that, or I'd sometimes let people do any plugs if you have anything going on. I know for you, I was going to have everyone like make sure they're praying for you. So you're doing pastoral year, right? Just started here in Tulsa, and then how many years do you have left of seminary?
Yeah, that's right. I'm doing pastoral year. So definitely, I would love people to pray for me, just that I would be docile to receive everything the Lord wants to give me and teach me this year. So I just completed 4 years of seminary, 2 years of pre-theology, 2 years of theology. This is at Kenrick Glenn Seminary in St. Louis.
Nice.
And this is my 5th year, pastoral year. And then after this, I will go back to seminary in St. Louis for a year and a half to finish school, be ordained a deacon, be in parish for 6 months, and then be a priest.
Oh, nice. You're like right there.
With this year, plus the rest, it's about 3. A little less than 3.
Okay, sweet. So it's right there, getting close. So that's awesome. Well, we'll continue to pray for you, and I know obviously I'll see you around. But we're gonna wrap this whole thing up with the Saint drafts. This is the common. Nice. I actually need another game. I'm starting to have some guests come back on the show, and so I need another game. But this is our signature. So if you guys haven't seen it before, this is our signature Saint draft, where I'm a big sports guy, so I had to incorporate it somehow. But we're gonna go back and forth drafting our top 5 favorite saints, or top 5 saints that, if they were all alive today, they could just completely save the world. Your goal as the audience is to vote below, like who you think has the best saint team, which it's kind of whose line is it anyway. There's no wrong answers. The points don't matter. Any team of saints would be amazing. So I'll let you draft first. And like I say, you do your first pick, and you just why you would pick that saint, and then I'll go back and forth. This should be the perfect segment that should be like brought to you by Sacrilegious. The Saint draft brought to you by Sacrilegious. So.
That would be sick.
Yeah.
So is it like, should I go in descending order, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
Yeah. So we'll start number 1, like your number 1 overall pick. So like, like if this is the NBA, it'd be like LeBron or Steph Curry. Like, who are you picking? Like,
Yeah. Okay. So actually, I'm gonna go with Saint John of Avila.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason being is like, yes, like he's my patron. He's been praying for me my whole life, and I feel part of the reason why I'm called to be a diocesan priest. There's many reasons, but I think his prayers definitely helped. But more importantly, like the reason why he's a saint as a diocesan priest is because he was a huge reformer in Spain in the 1600s, kind of or late 1500s, early 1600s, kind of a contemporary with Saint John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila. They were reforming the Carmelite order. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of laziness, and part of the Counter-Reformation that the church sort of responded to the Protestant Reformation with, which was so needed because there were, of course, many problems were going on at that time. But basically, he was like a scripture scholar. He preached fire. He converted people by his preaching. He was a good administrator. He really wanted to be a missionary. He wanted to go to Mexico, but he said, no, we need you here. And he was obedient. And because of that, he helped renew the church in Spain. And come on, that's awesome. Like the church needs renewal today, and I want to do that as a priest. So
that's
he's my number
awesome.
1.
Sweet. Well, I'll stick to the same, like in the same feel. So the patron saint of this podcast, and also someone I feel like has always communicated with me, and I didn't even realize it till later, but Saint Philip Neri. So I feel like it's such an awesome, became a priest later, but did the first 13 years of his mission just living with the homeless and like serving as the lay apostolate. And I think he's a reminder that like, as like lay people, it's like our job to be there for people like you guys, like the priests and stuff too. Like the priests can only do so much, but if we have a powerful lay apostolate that's out there evangelizing and out there inviting people in and really understand that when people find Jesus in the full communion, they also find joy, which is kind of where the happy holy hour comes from, is that happy portion. And the goal of this podcast is just to spread joy, spread Jesus on the internet. St. Philip Neri's there. Like St. Philip Neri, that's what he was about. that is always smiling, really jolly. Kind of actually, when I read the description of him, it reminds me of Father Webb, who used to be here. It's just awesome. Yeah. So that would be my number one pick.
Great. Number two?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, number two.
St. Paul, the Apostle.
Oh, okay. That's one of the most popular picks.
Oh, really? Well, it's he's one of the goats. And,
yeah.
He's the apostle to the Gentiles, and our world's becoming more and more an apostolic age again, and full of pagans. And we just need someone who can pour themselves out and is a qualified preacher to them. And Paul was that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, my number two, I would probably go, I don't know why, like, I just like find it funny that there's actually a patron saint of coffee and ugly people. And so I'd go Saint Drago. I had a girl on The Religious Hippie, Amber Snyder. I had her on the show a few weeks back, and that was her number one pick. And she's like, I've always loved Saint Drago. He's the patron saint of coffee and ugly people. I'm like, that's really funny. And I like to think like maybe they mean ugly in a physical sense, but like maybe they more mean like ugly in like a spiritual sense. And if he's like the patron saint of like praying for those people, like that's what we need today. Because there's a lot of ugly people in the world, like from a personality standpoint, and we just need more people to just like just love on people and like that. Yeah. So Saint Drago.
Great. Number three. Saint John of the Cross.
Okay.
I love his stuff. I've started to read it this past year, and I've just been so impressed and just blown away. It's really intense, but I mean, again, speaking of like renewal of the church, like it all begins with prayer and begins with just like our personal relationship with the Lord. He had it.
Yeah.
He's just spiritual master. So
yeah, absolutely. Someone I've been reading about lately because she's kind of so related with what I do for a living in fundraising, but it's St. Catherine Drexel. She'd be my number three. I think that like I found out that we're like a mission diocese, and I found that out from Catholic Extension, great organization that helps support dioceses that maybe need funding, and that kind of blew my mind. That like I know Tulsa's not super Catholic, but like we have plenty of people going around that could fund this, but there's no reason we should be a mission diocese. And I think it's because we've lost the sense of the spirituality of fundraising, which literally is a book. It's so small you can't see it up there, but just the obligation we have to support the church and the spiritual like gifts that come out of trusting God with your money. I think in today's age, the church should be completely fine financially, and unfortunately, that's just not the case. Now, here in Tulsa, I call it the Big Six. We have the Big Six churches that like they're fine, but like kind of those outside churches that you kind of get the outsides of Tulsa and the kind of the rural areas. That's where it's like, man, we could come together as the diocese and cover those people. We're just, it's, I don't know. We need someone to renew that thought process. Yeah. So that's the first time I've put her in my starting five. And that's only because I always pick a saint and like, I'm always like reading about them and then I move on to someone else, but she's been my one lately.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, and she's been here in Tulsa too. So she was through Tulsa and did a lot of the groundwork for the Holy Family School. So.
Right. She founded it, I think.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Blessed Stanley Luther, number 4.
Oh yeah.
I mean, local connection, but also he's just like, he was a beautiful witness of being on mission to I want to say minorities. I mean, it's true, but it was like a local native tribe in Guatemala. And the fact of the matter is, we have a lot of Hispanics here in our diocese, and it would be really good. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard, and I always like tell everyone to fact check me if you want, but like I heard that there was like when they found him, like after he was martyred, like his sleeves were rolled up and his knuckles were bloody. Like he like didn't leave without a fight. It's like he didn't just go there and be like, martyr me, but he was like, no, I'm going there and I'm going to protect my people. And like he fought back, and I'm like, that's pretty awesome. I don't want to say bad A, but I won't. That's pretty awesome. Like that's pretty epic. Yeah, he's a great one. Yeah. If I was going to match yours with the Blessed, I just can't get over like the stories that I've read about Blessed Carlos Acutis. He first of all won't be a blessed for much longer, but I love that aspect, like the stories of him, like these saints appearing to his mom in dreams. And St. Francis of Assisi being one of them. But then he appeared to his mom and said, kind of reiterated what St. Francis of Assisi told his mom, but saying like, your son is one of the highest of highs in heaven. Like a whole generation of saints are going to follow him. And I think I was like, that's so cool, and like should be so encouraging to all people out there of like we can do it too. Like we can become saints. That is our calling, to be saints and get to heaven. And Blessed Carlos Acutis literally said, "There's a whole generation of saints that are going to follow me." I'm like, that's awesome. Like that's so cool.
Yep.
So that'd be number 4?
Yep. So number 5.
All right. So number 5, and then we'll do a 6-man. And I have a different pick for that, but we'll go number 5 first.
St. Bernard of Clairvaux.
Okay. I don't know anything about him.
I mean, he was just an amazing monk. I mean, yeah. I guess I'm kind of boring. I just keep going to all these monks who just prayed a lot.
Yeah.
Really. But again, spiritual renewal. That's what I'm about. We all need to be about that right now in the church today.
Yeah.
But he just did it because he was so in love with God, and he wrote beautifully about him. And he preached beautifully about him, and he literally inspired. Like, this is so funny. He inspired a bunch of guys to go join the monastery with him. He showed up to the monastery to join it. He brought 31 guys with him, and they all joined the monastery.
Jeez, that's wild.
Yeah,
I feel like someone like that just has so much faith that it's like so much faith in God and His mission, and how powerful like being a monk and in going into prayer like that is. And so he was able to like say like I feel like I could do that with going to see a Marvel movie. It's like I need to work on being able to do that with talking about Jesus, talk about going to mass or adoration or something. Like, do I talk about that with the same excitement and fervor as I did about going to see Avengers Endgame back in the day or something? And yeah, that's great. All right, my next one would be, which I don't know, is she? I don't even know if she's servant of God or if she's anything, but Mother Angelica, is she? I don't know.
God, I can't remember. I mean,
yeah,
I'll let that pass because she's awesome. So
yeah, I was gonna say either way, and there's no rules. This is really a gray game. This is a gray area. There's no rule book, but mainly because of this. Like I love like her story of like she showed up and she got asked to be a guest on a show, and when she showed up, she's just like looking around. She's like, I need one of these. I guess Venerable Fulton Sheen could be another one to pick for the same reason. But someone like that saw like an opportunity, like podcasting, like there's such a great opportunity. It's such a great mission field. It's not for everyone. Not everyone's called to it, but I've always thought to myself, I actually had this debate with a focus missionary that thought the opposite, thought like we need to encourage everyone to get off social media, get off the internet, get off. And I do think there are a lot of people that should, like if you're doom scrolling or maybe you're tempted toward pornography, stuff like that. But I think some people are going to be called to the internet. We can't just leave it and let it become a wasteland of terrible stuff. Yeah. Bishop Barron, Matt Fradd, Father Mike Schmidt. I mean, just tons. And then if you could even think at the local level for us here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and think like the Catholic Man Show, Derek Lissy and Bishop Condola and the Tulsa Times, and then hopefully the fruits of this as well. But I've always felt super called to it. And so people like Mother Angelica or Fulton Sheen are two that are like, that I asked to pray for me and pray for this podcast, that we always have the right intentions and the right, because I think it could be something that not completely evangelizes, like we're going to save hundreds of thousands of people, but maybe we could plant hundreds of thousands of seeds, and maybe out of those seeds, like stuff will grow. And this will be something, and I always remind myself that I don't believe we'll know the full fruits of this podcast until like I'm meeting Jesus one day and like hopefully being welcomed into the kingdom, and him saying like, because of that podcast, you planted all these seeds you didn't even know, but you changed the lives of these people. And I want to be able to do that for God, utilizing talents and treasures and stuff, but always keep in mind what we talked about earlier. It's like keeping my intentions pure. Like this is God's podcast that He's allowing me to host, and keeping it that way. So,
right.
All right. So a 6-man, because we need a 6-man, or we can think of this as a coach. I was thinking like a Mary apparition. What about like a Marian apparition that you would, sometimes people like, I get into this and I forget to say, oh, Mary's off the table. And so right away you get the first pick. And like, okay, I pick Mary. I'm like, okay. Like, well, you win. See you guys next week. But since like, I was like, okay, sometimes I'll do blesseds, like someone that's not quite a saint yet, but we've already done a blessed in the starting 5. So like, we'll just pick a Mary apparition.
I am woefully uneducated in many of these.
I literally have just a few.
I pretty much only know like Our Lady of Guadalupe, and then the one in Vietnam, which I can't remember.
Yeah, the Our Lady of Guadalupe. Yeah, Our Lady of Guadalupe is awesome. Like, I mean, Saint Juan Diego and all that stuff. I literally just recently, like, even heard the very surface level story of that, and I was like, I thought it was Saint Juan Diego that was the one that like saw Mary, and Mary appeared to him as like, no, I appeared to like what was it, uncle or something, or I don't know, but that's a good one. Have you ever heard of? We can call this one a wash, but have you ever heard of Our Lady of Bonneau?
Actually, maybe.
So she's the Virgin of the Poor. There's a Oh, I just gave it to somebody. There's a book called Priests and Beggars by Kevin Wells, and it's about Father Al Schwartz, who is, I believe he's Venerable Father Al right now, but he rebuilt the church in South Korea. But he had a very, very big calling to like live, like he was a relatively modern saint. I think he died in the 90s. But he had a really a big calling to live with the poor, to serve the poor, but to fully submerge himself into the poor. Actually, the very first place he went to seminary, when he showed up, he actually did 1 year there and then left because it was too glamorous. It was too nice of a place. And he's like, I can't, like his room was super nice and everything was up to date. He's like, I can't live like this and be expected to be equipped to serve the poor. So he transferred to a place in Belgium that apparently that's what they're dedicated towards. But Our Lady of Bonneau appeared to a girl, I can't remember her name right now, but had her stick her hands into this ice cold water, and her dad like ran out there and like grabbed her. And when she grabbed her, like she had like, I don't remember if it was the stigmata specifically, or if it was just like she had the like the only thing that was on her hands like that was frostbitten was like where Jesus was nailed to the cross on his wrists. But then like the next morning it went away. So I don't know, a really interesting story. But yeah, Our Lady of Bonneau, I believe is how you say it. But that's always a cool one. But if you're ever interested, Priests and Beggars, it's a really good book. Nice. Super easy read. So awesome. Well, you guys, again, comment below which one you guys think, what starting five you think would save the world. Obviously, both would be amazing. But yeah, we obviously have our Patreon as well. You guys can sign up and support, continue to help us grow the channel, bringing on more people, doing more stuff. We do have all of our apparel stuff launching soon through Sacrilegious. But in the meantime, if you guys want anything Sacrilegious, you can just use the link in the description or the promo code HAPPY for 10% off. And then check out the Patreon to sign up to be a monthly donor to, like I said, help support the channel. Other than that, Luke, thanks for being on. I look forward to, maybe having you back on one day. And we'll be obviously following along with like your story becoming a priest and everything. And so, but we will see you guys next week. And I think it's Tanner Kalina next week, who is on staff for the Eucharistic Congress, which is going to be fun. So join us next week, and we'll see you guys next time.